You are alive because thousands of ancient babies survived. Not one, not 10, thousands. Every generation in your family tree had to keep at least one child alive long enough to grow up and have children of their own. The strange part? Most of those children were born into a world without medicine. No antibiotics, no vaccines, no pediatricians, no hospitals, nothing. And yet somehow, the chain never broke. Generation after generation, enough children survived. Enough to eventually produce you. What's even more surprising is that human babies are terrible at survival. And here's the shocking part. For most of human history, many children never reached adulthood. Disease, infection, starvation, accidents, death was everywhere. So how did ancient humans accomplish something that should have been nearly impossible? How did they keep their babies alive before medicine existed? Because the answer reveals one of the greatest survival strategies in human history. And it may explain why our species survived at all. Part 1. The human baby problem. To understand the solution, you first need to understand the problem. Human babies are incredibly vulnerable. A newborn cannot walk. It cannot feed itself. It cannot protect itself. It cannot survive on its own. For years, it depends entirely on other people. And throughout most of human history, that dependency created a serious problem. Ancient parents had no hospitals, no antibiotics, no vaccines, no modern understanding of disease. A simple infection could become deadly. A harsh winter could threaten an entire community. Food shortages could push families to the brink of survival. Yet generation after generation, enough children survived. Why? The answer begins with a strange fact about humans. Human babies are born unfinished. That sounds harsh, but from an evolutionary perspective, it's true. Humans evolved unusually large brains. The problem is that a fully developed baby brain would never fit through the birth canal. So evolution made a compromise. Babies are born earlier than they ideally would be. At birth, the human brain is only about a quarter of its adult size. The rest develops outside the womb, which means human childhood became incredibly long. And that created a survival crisis, because now parents had to protect a completely helpless child for years. Not days, not weeks, years. So how did they solve that problem? Not through strength, not through technology, but through something far more powerful. Cooperation. Part 2. The real superpower of humans. When people think about human evolution, they usually think about tools. Fire, hunting, intelligence, but one of humanity's greatest survival technologies wasn't any of those things. It was cooperation. Ancient humans discovered that raising children worked better when everyone helped. Anthropologists call this cooperative breeding, and it may be one of the most important reasons our species survived. A child wasn't protected by one exhausted parent. It was protected by an entire community. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, older siblings, aunts, uncles, even unrelated members of the group. A child belonged to everyone. That mattered because every extra set of eyes increased survival. If one caregiver became sick, someone else could step in. If food became scarce, resources could be shared. If danger appeared, there was always someone watching. Ancient humans didn't rely on individuals. They built networks, and those networks kept children alive. But community support could only do so much. Eventually, every baby faced the same challenge: food. Part 3. The milk that built humanity. Today, if breastfeeding becomes difficult, alternatives exist. Ancient humans had no alternatives. Breast milk wasn't just food, it was survival. It provided hydration, nutrition, and immune protection, long before humans understood germs. Mothers were passing antibodies to their children through milk. In many ancient societies, children breastfed for 2, 3, or even 4 years. That sounds unusual today, but throughout most of human history, it was normal. Breastfeeding offered another advantage as well. It naturally delayed future pregnancies. That gave parents more time, energy, and resources to focus on each child. And when a mother couldn't breastfeed, communities often stepped in. Other women sometimes nursed babies that weren't their own. This practice, known as wet nursing, appears throughout human history. Once again, survival depended on cooperation. But food wasn't the only danger. The environment itself was constantly threatening a child's life. Part 4. Why ancient babies were almost never alone. Ancient babies spent very little time by themselves, and for good reason. Newborns struggle to regulate body temperature. Too cold? Dangerous. Too hot? Dangerous. Left alone? Also dangerous. So ancient caregivers developed a simple but effective solution: constant contact. Babies were carried almost everywhere: against the chest, on the back, in slings, in wraps, passed between parents, grandparents, and siblings. For most of the day, they remained attached to another human being. Modern science now shows why this worked. Physical contact helps regulate breathing, heart rate, stress levels, body temperature, even brain development. Ancient people didn't know the science. They only knew the results, and because it worked, the practice survived for thousands of generations. But daytime wasn't the most dangerous period. Night was. Part 5. The Dangerous Hours of Darkness. For most of human history, night was terrifying. No electricity, no streetlights, no emergency services. Only darkness, which is why ancient babies rarely slept alone. Across cultures and continents, infants usually slept close to caregivers, close enough to hear breathing, close enough to nurse, close enough to feel warmth. A nearby parent provided food, protection, comfort, and an early warning system against danger. Connection meant safety, isolation meant risk, but eventually every child faced another challenge: transitioning from milk to real food. And that's where things become surprisingly strange. Part 6. The strangest baby food in history. Imagine trying to feed a baby without blenders, without baby food, without supermarkets, without modern kitchens. Ancient parents had a simple solution: they became the blender. Adults often chewed food before feeding it to infants. The practice is known as pre-mastication. Today it sounds unusual, but for thousands of years it was common. It softened food, made digestion easier, and allowed children to eat foods they otherwise couldn't handle. It wasn't elegant, but it worked, and in the ancient world, what worked survived. Yet even with all these strategies, many children still died, which brings us to the hardest truth. Part 7. The Brutal Reality. Ancient parenting was not a success story without tragedy. Child mortality was devastating. Disease, infection, malnutrition, accidents. Many children never reached adulthood. Parents knew this better than anyone, yet they continued fighting for every child. Archaeologists have discovered carefully prepared infant burials containing ornaments, flowers, and offerings, evidence that ancient parents loved their children deeply. They grieved, they hoped, and they did everything they could to improve a child's chances of survival. Over thousands of generations, small improvements accumulated: a safer sleeping arrangement, a better way to carry infants, a useful medicinal plant, a stronger support network. Tiny advantages repeated for centuries slowly shaped human civilization. So how did ancient humans keep their babies alive without medicine? The answer wasn't one invention. It wasn't one miracle discovery. It was something much bigger. They built a system based on breastfeeding, shared responsibility, generational knowledge, physical contact, and above all, human cooperation. Ancient humans didn't have antibiotics, they didn't have pediatricians, they didn't have vaccines. What they had was each other. And that may have been the most important survival technology our species ever invented. Because when you trace your family tree back thousands of generations, you'll discover something remarkable. Every single one of your ancestors succeeded at the same challenge: keeping a helpless child alive long enough to grow up and do the same, again and again, for hundreds of thousands of years. The fact that you're here isn't just proof that humans survived, it's proof that countless ordinary people succeeded at one of the hardest tasks nature ever created: keeping a human baby alive. And maybe that's the real story of our species. Not strength, not technology, not even intelligence, but care.